Madam President, the Nobel laureate Derek Walcott describes resilience and survival capacity of our people to renew, adapt, and transform despite natural and human disaster. He says, "The tribe in bondage learned to fortify itself. What seemed to be surrender was redemption. What seemed the loss of tradition was its renewal. What seemed the death of faith was its rebirth." I believe that the dislocation caused by Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic afforded the Bahamas an opportunity for rebirth and an opportunity to reimagine a more sustainable, safe, inclusive, and people-centric Bahamas. I am pleased that after a period of about 2 years in which the government focused on rebuilding and reopening the economy and providing a social safety net in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, we can now adjust our sails to focus on a new vision for the Bahamas, one that is future-focused and people-centric, one where every policy and every decision is transparent and made in consultation with the Bahamian people. Madam President, I rise in this honorable place, giving thanks to God for allowing me to see today. I continue to thank the Bahamian people for the tremendous support they give me. To every person I see in the street or the store, or anyone who sends messages on social media with kind words or messages of solidarity, I thank you for the support. And to every Bahamian watching or listening today, please know that I will always be guided by your mandate to me to serve all and not just the connected few. I also thank the Honorable Prime Minister, who has vested confidence in me to help manage the affairs of this honorable chamber and to help guide our country's trade policy and trade promotion as Deputy Chairman of the Bahamas. Madam President, I've recently returned from Luanda, Angola, where I was part of the Bahamas delegation that attended the 147th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union. For those who are unfamiliar with the IPU, it's a collection of member parliaments working toward 5 strategic objectives, namely to build effective and empowered parliaments through empowering parliamentarians to operate freely, to promote inclusive and representative parliaments, to support resilient and innovative parliaments through the adoption of new technologies, to catalyze collective parliamentary action, which includes the organization of regional and global events to focus on effective policy development, and to strengthen the accountability of national parliaments. Madam President, as you are aware, in our Blueprint for Change, we committed to revitalizing Parliament, to ensuring Parliament's independence, to ensuring that Parliament is strong and effective. In the last session, we passed the Parliamentary Service Bill. This was a first major step. And in the last session, we also passed a resolution for the Bahamas to join the IPU. The 147th Assembly in Angola was the Bahamas' first attendance as a full member of the IPU. The Bahamas became the 180th country in the world to join the Union. This is a significant milestone for our nation. The delegation traveled was a balanced bipartisan group which was led by Minister Pia Glover-Roll and included myself, Senator Maxine Seymour, and Assistant House Clerk Rashad Flowers. That was Maxine. It's interesting. I spoke to my colleague a bit earlier, and I was hoping that Senator Seymour would have been here. I think we've finally convinced an FNM that we don't go on vacation. We actually do the work of the Bahamian people. Let me tell you, we had Senator Seymour in meetings from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. doing the work of the people.
You think we can get any more that travel?
So I won't say how she flew. However, I will say that the entire delegation, including Senator Seymour, we were all actively engaged in all committees of the IPU, the General Assembly of the IPU, and the Bahamas delegation performed well. So I hope she brings that good news back to the Bahamas and back so she can tell the FNM in particular that we do the work of the Bahamian people. I was proud to see our Minister Pia Glover-Roll addressed the General Assembly on behalf of the Bahamas. We were warmly welcomed into the IPU family by leaders of the IPU and all global leaders. During the General Assembly, we engaged with parliamentarians from various nations, forging connections and networks that will undoubtedly contribute to our international and national agenda. I also had the privilege of addressing the full General Assembly on behalf of young parliamentarians from around the world. Madam President, I am pleased to report that the Bahamas was well represented and made a great first impression as the newest member of the IPU. However, our work is just getting started. We've joined the GRULAC group of nations representing the interests of Latin American and Caribbean nations, and we've formed key relationships with leaders and representatives from across the globe. Meaningful ties with the Bahamian delegation were met. This highlights the crucial importance of having continuity across delegations, Madam President, in our international engagement. By having consistent representation at these meetings, we ensure that the Bahamas always has a seat at the table as we build stronger relationships and alliances to ensure that our needs are met on the global stage. Madam President, I look forward to our continued participation in the IPU. Now, to Bahamians who this government, rest assured that as long as we sit in government, you have a government willing to put the swift implementation of our blueprint for change in action. We believe that when we won, the blueprint for change became our social contract with the Bahamian people. And key on that agenda is a legislative agenda to rescue the economy and to create Bahamian empowerment. Madam President, with this as a backdrop, we are here today with a renewed focus, ready to expedite our legislative and policy agenda to continue to create a better country for all Bahamians. I would like to personally thank our new Governor General, the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, for her delivery of the speech from the throne. She continues to be an inspiration to me and to our nation as an exemplary leader and stateswoman who has lived her life in service of others and now continues to serve her people as our Governor General. As I stand here today, Madam President, it would be remiss of me not to formally mention the death of the Honorable Obi Wilshcombe. I know my colleagues this morning would have had an opportunity to acknowledge this great loss and commemorate Mr. Wilshcombe. I join them in formally offering my condolences to his family and to the people of West Grand Bahama and Bimini on this great loss. This nation is better today because of the contributions made by our fallen colleague. We must now honor his legacy by ensuring that our legislative priorities continue to reflect what is in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Madam President, I'd also like to offer my condolences on the passing of Dr. Perry Gomez, a veteran physician whose life's work was specializing in HIV and AIDS, helping many Bahamians who suffered from these ailments. He is a national hero who contributed as a physician and as a member of Parliament. Madam President, I would also like to offer my condolences to the family of Ambassador Alma Adams on her passing. Now, this one has struck close to home. Mrs. Adams was a personal friend and a support of mine, an advocate for me who became a friend. She offered me wise counsel, a supportive smile, and a hug at just the right moments. She, too, is a national hero. She is a patriot. She was a standard bearer for the PLP. She served as a senator in this honorable place. She was a Bahamas Consul General in Florida and the Bahamas Ambassador to Cuba. And most recently, she was the founding chancellor of the Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs. She was a devoted public servant, progressive foot soldier, diplomat, teacher, and mother. She was simply great, and she will be missed. Madam President, just over 2 years ago, the new PLP administration took office facing a country that was in dire straits. We met a nation in crisis. But Madam President, oh, what a difference 2 years can make. Our debt to GDP ratio has dropped to pre-pandemic levels. Unemployment is now at its lowest level since 2008 and still dropping. Tourism numbers have now surpassed pre-pandemic levels, and we are seeing record numbers of tourists on our shores each and every day. There are those who want you to believe that not only was the COVID pandemic recovery boom inevitable, but they also have you believe that what we are experiencing now is somehow a continued extension of that post-COVID boom. Every economic success we have moving forward will somehow be attributed to global external conditions and not the hard work and innovation of our government and our business community. We know their talking point all too well. But Madam President, let's be clear. No country in this region can lay claim to the tourism success we are seeing. Maybe, Madam President, just maybe, expanding flight capacity, bringing in new investments, finishing the cruise port, refurbishing Family Island airports, and strategically promoting our nation on the world stage has a lot to do with the success that we are seeing. Just maybe. World Bank data indicates that our economy grew by 14.4% last year, Madam President, which is above regional average. You don't get above average results by running on autopilot, Madam President. While World Bank acknowledges that many countries have returned to pre-pandemic employment levels in the region, we have gone a step further. We have returned to the lowest levels since the 2008 global recession, once again going above and beyond the average. When you see us separating ourselves from the pack in this way, you must say that our policies, that our ingenuity, and that our hard work has something to do with it. And so, Madam President, with the same zeal that we've accomplished our priorities from our first legislative session, we approach the second legislative session. Unlike our predecessors, who had one long, arduous, and painful 4.5-year session of Parliament with nothing to show for it, but a collection of painful-to-watch national addresses, we intend to tick off each priority from our blueprint for change as we transform this country. Madam President, this is a government for all, not just the privileged few. It's not just about the number of opportunities we create for Bahamians either, although we're creating a lot of opportunities. But it is about the quality of those opportunities. No qualified Bahamian is interested in remaining at the entry level for their entire career. No Bahamian professional who has invested time and money into self-development and education wants to hit an impenetrable glass ceiling that sees them stuck in the middle of the corporate structure. Our people deserve pathways to unimpeded career growth based on their qualifications, experience, and performance. If you have conversations with employees at various companies, you will hear stories of the head bartender, the club manager, the housekeeping manager, posts that have been monopolized by foreign hires. Now, we're not talking about rare or unique skill sets here that you can't find in the Bahamas. There are Bahamians who currently possess these skills and are qualified for these posts, and preparation should be made for them to step into these roles. Bahamians deserve to have senior level posts in all corporations in the Bahamas. But even in the case of specialized and high skill roles, Madam President, with few exceptions, there should be Bahamians identified and trained to fill these roles too eventually. This is not up to the discretion of the employer. This is a matter of policy. And unfortunately, for many years, this has not been the case. Not only has enforcement not been prioritized, there have traditionally been no personnel assigned to even enforce our laws to see if companies are abiding by the law. So now, Madam President, that is why in this legislative session, one of our policy initiatives is launching a new Notice of Vacancy unit at the Department of Labor, which will ensure that the law is enforced. Our people rely on the government to protect them, and this unit will step in to ensure that in instances when an employer hires a non-Bahamian, a Bahamian understudy is identified and is actively being trained. Eventually, in accordance with that training plan, the Bahamian will be elevated to that role, eliminating the need for the role to be filled by a non-Bahamian. Madam President, again, let's be clear. This will be the biggest step to protect Bahamian workers since the introduction of Bahamianization policies. It was the PLP government that fought for the interest of Bahamian professionals back then, and unsurprisingly, it is the PLP government that has now stepped up to protect our people once again. Bahamianization continues to be a priority for the PLP. Madam President, we are equally focused on economic security. During this legislative session, you can expect to see a slate of bills that lays the foundation for the new Bahamian economy. The new Registrar General Bill will pave the way for a modern registrar with greater online accessibility. I know attorneys like the ones at the table, we can rest assured and feel happy and more comfortable that we are bringing our legal profession into the 21st century. The Consumer Protection Bill, which the House has debated and passed, and that we will debate next week, will protect the Bahamian public from misleading and dishonest business practices, allow for formal complaints to be made by consumers, and strengthen our existing laws to account for 21st century developments, such as commerce activities. The new Economic Empowerment Zone legislation will outline the incentives and concessions available in specific geographic areas in the Bahamas. This is a critical step that enterprising nations take to ensure that opportunities are mapped out and investments are made strategically. In particular, for a nation like ours that's an archipelago, we must ensure that investment flow throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And as we seek to attract investors to our shores and empower domestic entrepreneurs, we must modernize our intellectual regime. This is critical as we invest in our orange economy. And this is a key priority for the Bahamas Trade Commission as we promote Bahamian brands to the world. We must ensure that Bahamians can protect their brands here at home and ensure that foreign businesses also feel comfortable in knowing that their brands and businesses are protected in the Bahamas as well. Madam President, the Bahamas' high cost of living has placed a strain on families and businesses for decades. Unfortunately, the recent global inflation crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened an already bad situation. This administration took quick, decisive action by lowering customs duties, lowering the overall VAT rate, and ramping up price control enforcement. But this was not enough to offset historically high global inflation. And it is lower-income Bahamians who struggle the most. In a short period of time, it has become more and more difficult for them to make ends meet. And while we cannot put an end to global inflation, Madam President, we can continue to take swift and decisive action domestically where it makes sense and where it will make a difference. The Bahamas has an economy that is traditionally dependent on imports. Bahamians often say, we import everything. We import all our food, goods, equipment. Of course, we import oil. And that makes the cost of living here in the Bahamas extremely expensive. And this system is hardwired into our economic model. Changing that model, which has been around for generations, is no small task. We're not talking about a quick Band-Aid fix here. We are talking about reimagining the way our economy works. It is a necessary step that we must take if we are serious about enhancing our economic security. The Bahamas Trade Commission is working tirelessly to help Bahamian businesses diversify our imports by seeking to build direct relationships with producers and manufacturers so that we can cut out the middleman, making the Bahamian consumer experience a cost savings. Madam President, as you see, this parliamentary session is quite ambitious. We did not come into office to implement small incremental changes. The Bahamian people did not vote for us to do that. Not when the cost of living is still as high as it is, not when income inequality is as high as it is, and not when not enough Bahamians own a stake in our economy. What started off as a collection of policies and ideas has coalesced into a vision for our nation that will now manifest as a legislative agenda that will lay the foundation for change, the change we have outlined in our blueprint for change. Madam President, we have accomplished a lot in 2 short years, but we recognize that a lot is not enough. Over the next 3 years, we will continue to build on the progress we've made with full assurance that the Bahamas we will have at the end of our term will be far more prosperous, healthy, and secure compared to the Bahamas that we met in September 2021. Madam President, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And in our journey to transform this country, I'm reminded of my grandmother's saying, "Make haste while the sun is still out." That's the mantra of this government, Madam President. Make haste while the sun is still out. Madam President, we are making haste. With that, I once again thank our Governor General, the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, for her most gracious speech from the throne. Our new mandate is set. May God bless our Governor General, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Madam President.